interchangeable. So when we're talking about really the most wise of us, the most crowned of all, that those voices have an equalization that happens, which is a fascinating thing. So I'll go ahead and dive in. My name is Kristina MacMullen, and I have the great privilege of serving as the Director of Choral Studies here at Baylor. I just finished my first year, and I'm so proud to be a Baylor Bear. And we'll give you a little bit of just biographical information, just so you know where I'm coming from and where my experiences are rooted. I am originally from Michigan and have 2 degrees from Michigan State University. My doctorate is from Texas Tech, and prior to working in academia, I taught public school. And I taught for 8 years, and within those 8 years, I spent a large amount of time working with middle school and high school students. I had one 3-year window in my career where I was working exclusively with 5th through 8th grade students. And so in that stretch of time, those students taught me so much about the adolescent. Now, when we talk about the adolescent voice, the changing voice, that can begin as early as age 9 and will continue until these youngsters are approximately 27, 28. Some of you may remember your voice change. Some of you may have blocked that out in your life. But I remember turning 24, and it was like God had sent angels to kiss my throat. Like, what happened? But I was getting older, and there were things that I could do with my voice that I could not do. And I had major gaps in my voice, all through high school and somewhat through middle school. And nobody talked to me about my voice change. I just thought I was a bad singer. And so, interestingly, is an intersection. When I was a brand new teacher, I went to a conference in Michigan that was hosted by the Michigan Schools Vocal Music Association. And there was a clinician there, Dr. Lynn Gackel, who gave a session that in all of my years of teaching, I will credit as the most valuable intro session I had ever attended, and still to this day I've never attended. And in that moment, young little 20-something Christy, with no idea who she was or what role she would play in my life, felt seen in so many ways, and also had the realization, oh, I'm not broken. And so many of us as vocalists, and also our students, if somebody is not guiding them through this process and speaking with them about it, don't understand it's a natural process that is long-lived and there's nothing broken about you. And I thought I was just a bad singer and that I just had problems with my voice. And so in that moment, so many things changed. And it also had a profound impact on how I approached the classroom from that point forward. And I was teaching middle school at the time, as I said, and in my middle school choir program, I had 350 kids. It was huge. That was in a school of just over 1,000. So I had over a third of the school in choir. And I had 100 8th graders. So when I would take the 8th graders on a field trip, the 8th grade shut down because I wiped out every single class. So I voice tested every single kid, every single semester, because I found it to be so helpful, not only for myself, but also for those students. And what is a beautiful thing, and I sense this about Lynn Gackel when I observed her working with students, that we can look into the eyes of a kid who doesn't know who they are, doesn't know what's happening with their emotions, their body, and all these things, and say, you are uniquely made, as unique as your fingerprint is, so too is your voice. And I love this idea of having a voice print that is distinct and unique. And if we've really taken that information, it's just absolutely evidence of the creativity of God. So let's dive into these magnanimous years. Middle school. So these are some of the things that our students, and you'll have to forgive me, I will call them my students. And the music that I share with you today, I've got some examples of problematic music. It's all rooted in my own experience, not as a church musician, but as a teacher in public schools. But all all of it can transfer to your environment. So when I say students, I suppose you probably count them as your students as well. Who am I? This is, and let me just say, undergraduate is a lot like middle school. But the stakes are higher, and the consequences are more long-lived. Right, but it is, there's a lot of parallel. Who am I? What is, now this never goes away, does it? Never goes away. I just had my annual physical and got all this blood work done, you know, they checked everything, and so I got the results, and I don't know so I spent today, what does this acronym mean? Finding out my red blood cells, all those things. But no more acutely than when we go through puberty. I have 2 children who are prepubescent. I have an 8-year-old and a 10-year-old, and it's really sweet and endearing to watch them talk about what is down the line. They're both anticipating puberty because I have one who's really short, and she is just dying to have a growth spurt. Mama, when am I going to have growth spurts? I said, you're related to me, so it probably will never happen. And my son, who is a beautiful soprano, I mean, just angelic, has a much higher voice than my 8-year-old daughter. He'll say, Mom, I think my voice is getting lower. I said, no, sorry, buddy, you can't fool me. I'm an expert. And I'll tell you when you're a mid-voice 2A and when you're a mid-voice 2B. So what's happening to my body? There is and this doesn't go away. It's so interesting. These things sort of adapt and change as we look at the different stages of life. But so many of these things are still true of all of us, no matter how old we are. Whether I'm a mother-in-law who's moved to Waco, where do I belong? She's finding community here at age 79. Social risk-taking. So we see risk-taking in all of these phases, and we see them sort of distinguish themselves. So in middle school, largely social risk-taking. They crave freedom and adult support. This is where we begin to form our identity. We try out sports or music and learn a little bit about what we like and where our people are situated. Yes, there's peer pressure, and yes, we require structure. Okay, high school. This is where our focus becomes a little bit more about who will we become, what are my strengths, and I think even, I think every single year I observe a greater pressure, and I see this with my own children, a greater pressure to be involved in something that is going to set you up for college, right? To be in travel athletics, or, my kid is 10. Oh my gosh, if I started him in soccer this year, it's too late for him. He should have been playing, and these things are, in my not so humble opinion, problematic because we're forcing kids to sort of narrow rather than to have a broad-based experience. But it's just earlier and earlier. So I think we're asking kids to think about this. What do you want to do with your life? Rather than allowing them to be generalists. They crave, so there's experiential risk-taking. Anybody who has a teenage child or has had a teenage child in their life can understand that firsthand. They crave empowerment and challenge. So when we're talking with high school students, they really want to be treated as adults, even though they're not adults. They're very playful, joyful in certain ways as well, but they want to be taken more seriously. And this is a confirmation of the identity that they've started to form. Academics becomes very high stakes, and these students require respect. This is connected to being taken more seriously. University, wait, who am I? It's a big one. How do I manage this freedom? There's still that desire, that fundamental desire to belong, that God has designed us to be in community with others. There's philosophical risk-taking. So this is when we really begin to come into our own in terms of what do I believe? What are my priorities? That's primary. Pressure, there's great pressure to succeed, and also that great question of life trajectory. Any college students in the room right now facing this? I see you. I hope you feel seen by this slide. Get a job, and then so that's just to contextualize sort of the sociological experience and all of the ground and sand that's ever shifting for these students, for these kids. And you'll note parentheticals. These are John from Lynn Gappelchase, and then there's also John Cooksey. John Cooksey is who we look to as sort of the leader or the first pioneer in terms of establishing stages in the male voice change. John Cooksey was Lynn Gappel's teacher. So she was a student of his, and when she saw, wow, we have these stages identified for the male voice change, no one has done this for the female voice change, that sent her on the pursuit of studying it and understanding it. I'm recovering from a sickness, so I'm hoping my voice cracks quite a bit today and breaks so that you feel very much at home in this session about the changing voice. I said to my husband, my voice isn't quite right yet, so it's a perfect day for me to do this. So this is true no matter the gender, whether we're talking about male student or female student. These things are consistent of both. What we tend to, the female voice breaks and cracks, it just doesn't dip an octave when it does it. So when we look at the shift of the human voice, the tenor bass voice, the male voice, is a much more seismic leap, and the vocal folds move this direction, so they have a different orientation. That's why we have an Adam's apple and not an Eve's apple, although we know about Eve's apple, right? But we have Adam's apple because of what happens. And don't ask me anything about cricoid, arytenoid, cartilage, or anything like that. That's way above my pay grade. I am simply a practitioner who knows how to get things done. I don't always know why it works, but I know what works. So there's breathiness and huskiness in the tone. So what's happening is the vocal folds are actually thickening. And as this is all of this change is happening, they don't come together for full closure during phonation. So if we're looking at vocal pedagogy, when we sing, the vocal folds are coming together, there's closure, and then there's airflow. When the voice changes, that closure opens by virtue of all of the physiological shift, and that's when we get blow dry tone. And you can teach people to sing around it. It's possible, but that's what we're talking about. Huskiness, to me, when I think about that term, it's not just breathiness, it's sort of like the Godfather, right? I had a student, I did an honor choir out on the East Coast, and it involved people from Long Island. And I had a student come up to me at the end and say, Dr. MacMullen. No joke. Thank you so much. And the student was like this tall, right? And I thought, well, I'm talking to the Godfather right now. But that is the closest thing I can share with you in terms of huskiness. There's just not a core to the sound. It's not clear, it's not bell-like, it's diffused. It sounds like it's been a little traumatized. That's what it is. I mean, if you think about the traumatic nature of what's happening, cracking or voice breaks. So we'll look specifically at the tenor, the male and the female voice, but we have the emergence of passaggi. Passaggio is the Italian term for passageway. So when we're singing, we all have passaggio. We're all adults in this room. But the passaggios are emerging through the voice change. And this is why we will see these extreme drops. There are breaking points in registration. And those registrations, again, this has to do with which cartilage are driving the vocal modality. So with chest voice, there's a set of cartilage. There's a different set of cartilage for head voice, and don't ask me what they are. Those are things I always have to look up when I'm giving my vocal pedagogy speech to my grad students. Obvious transition notes, okay? And I'll model and pretend to be these some context, and then you might see them 2 months later, and they open their mouth, and it's a totally different voice. I'll never forget this. This happened to my cousin Tommy. I only saw him at the holidays, and so I saw Tommy when, like, I don't know, at 4th of July, he was a soprano, and then at Christmas, he was a baritone. And I'll never forget it. And nobody told me, of course, and so he said hi, and I went, what just, who is this? Right? So, insecurity of pitch. Insecurity of pitch. This is really big. It's so important that we don't make too many pronouncements over kids while they're going through stuff like this. I've heard, I don't want to say horror story, but I've heard lament after lament where somebody was told by a teacher that they couldn't sing, or that they shouldn't be in choir because of X, Y, Z, or they should probably go do something else. It's something that is a through line in speaking with people, and again, those sorts of messages can communicate to someone that they're not worthy or that they're broken, and sometimes the voice is just going through real trauma and it can't match pitch. So last week, 2 weeks, I don't know, 2 weeks ago, I got sick, and it's a rare thing for me to lose my voice. It only happens maybe once every 5 years. It's very rare. But it happened last week, and I tried to sing, and I had a hard time matching pitch. And so that's not an indicator of my innate musicianship or my oral ability. It was because I couldn't maneuver, because my chords were so swollen, I couldn't do it. And I learned a big lesson. I had a middle school student, and I gave them a music aptitude test. It's one of the Gordon music aptitude tests that measures our tonal and rhythmic aptitude. And one of the highest scoring kids in the class had a really hard time matching pitch. And if I had only judged his ability based on his replication of pitch, I would have never known that this kid was a fabulous musician that was just going through a rough patch. So, difficulty in phonation, as I said, the chords aren't fully coming together, and obviously there's a timbral shift. Physiological changes, so the larynx is getting larger, just like the human is getting larger. The vocal folds are thickening, they're changing orientation. The mutational chink has to do with the development of cartilage. This is something that is connected to the passaggio, and we'll talk about where those passaggio emerge for the different voices. The resonating cavities get bigger. This is one reason I love teaching middle school, because sometimes someone's nose grows faster than the rest of them. So a kid would come in after 6th grade and come into 7th grade, and all of a sudden their nose is huge, and the rest of the face hasn't caught up. And then the next year the face catches up, right? So all of these things. Have you noticed in a child when they go from having the sweet, chubby, round, pinchable, squishy self to becoming a little more chiseled and adult in terms of their architecture? So all of these resonating cavities change shape, and that also influences the sound of the voice. And all of these things come together to create individuals. And then we see the more adult body emerge. This is really important to know. You can't always judge. Like if a kid walks in and they're super tall, you might think their voice has changed, but that's not always true. They can have a height growth spurt before the voice changes. I had a 5th grader named Luke. I'll never forget this. Luke was this big, and if I looked at Luke, I would have thought, oh, he's a little soprano. And he was like a little frog baritone. And I was voicing him, voice testing him, and his voice kept, I wonder if this is on. Oh yeah, it is. So, ooh, cool. Let's go to the piano, because I'll giggle every time so yeah, this is an E, kept going down. That's how you know I've been sick, that's a low C. Oh, you're recording? Very good. I have a couple friends who are mezzo-sopranos, and when I'm sick or I've stayed up too late and I have a low voice, I'll just send them a voice memo demonstrating my low notes. So Luke kept going, and he was just this big, and he had a little chubby, sweet face, but his voice had changed. you could look at the onset of puberty and those years. So it's always going to be tied to that.
Okay.
So, but I'm not aware of that. And what I was reading didn't specify that. It was focused in, they just said America. And so, but it is an interesting thing to think about. And, you know, think about growth hormone in dairy products. And I think people are more aware of it now, but it's a reality of our world.
I mean, is that like maybe urban versus rural?
I don't know, but if you do, I mean, I'm sure there's all kinds of data in terms of health departments tracking these things, because it's concerning, you know, to see that sort of a shift. Okay, so we'll start with the male voice change, and these are the six. Even though it's not stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, there are 6 stages. Unchanged is just a sweet little voice soprano that has a flute for an instrument. Sounds almost identical to a young treble girl's voice. There's a slight, the chords are slightly thicker for boys, so you get that resonance. Do we all know, we have in our ear the sound of a voice soprano? It's just slightly different, and I hear it with my own children. So both of my children have lovely little voices, but when my boy sings really high, it's just glorious. Bless my little daughter, bless her heart. So I'll try to be a little boy right now. So that's a G. It's a flute, and there's not a register shift. It's seamless. It's not incredibly powerful, but it's clear and bell-like. None of the middle school boys want to be in this stage. None of them do, but some of them are. And I will admit before the Lord and all of you that I may have fibbed with some children who would come in and be like, I think my voice is changing. And no, there's nothing happening. I say, oh, maybe I might be hearing something. Okay. That's all they needed. Okay, so it's like in Dumb and Dumber. When he says, oh, you're saying there's a chance.
Yeah.
Oh, I love this. When I give Dumb and Dumber references to high school kids, they're like, they don't know what they're missing out on. So in mid-voice 1, the initial period of voice change, and I never remember, Olivia, you're going to have to help me out. It's middle C, C5. C4. It's C4, and then the C above it is C5. I never remember that. So I'm starting on C4, and the biggest shift that I hear in this first stage, stage 1, this is what typically happened. The top, so before we went, I wonder if I can turn this. Would it help you to see the keyboard? Are you? Okay. So once you get to C to F, that's where the voice starts to go away for this first stage. So, that's what the first stage sounds like. And so they're really uncomfortable singing above that C. I still would encourage you to have them singing from C4 to C5. I want you to know that kids are resilient. And so obviously if a child is in pain or blood is protruding from the larynx, you should stop whatever you're asking them to do. But I'm just kidding. But what I will say is I just encourage kids to sing through it, because I always found that in the end, as long as we are holding their hand through it and saying to them, this is normal, and telling them this is what's going to happen. I'll never forget this flight. I was flying around Chicago, and the pilot came on. You know, it's always concerning when the pilot speaks to you. And so the pilot comes on the loudspeaker, and she said, we are headed into turbulence. In about 10 minutes, you're going to experience these things. The plane is going to drop. It's going to blah, 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 blah. She essentially went through all of the things. we will be fine. We'll get through it. And I will tell you that that little speech that she gave to us helped me so much because I knew exactly what was going to happen, and I was assured that we were going to be okay. Much different than if we were flying along and the plane suddenly dropped, and I wasn't expecting it. Well, that's essentially a metaphor for what is happening with these students. And so with any youth choir that you work with, before the changes begin, having open dialogues with them on the regular is so helpful because it helps them understand that it's normal and that you're there to help them through it and that there's light at the end of the tunnel, okay? The next stage, so this is mid-voice 2. So mid-voice 1 is that we lose that top, C to F. And then mid-voice 2 and mid-voice 2A, these are not a fun place to be. So stage 2, what happens is the upper part of this octave gets to be a little bit more stressful for that student, and they're also adding some notes at the bottom. So with a young, unchanged treble male, this might be the bottom. You're going to get a little bit more meat there from a mid-voice 2. And I would say for those students, they're pretty happy from F to about A. F to about A, so the F below middle C to about A, that's a good range. Now, when we get to mid-voice 2A, this is the worst time for a young man. So if we have sort of an octave and a fifth for the unchanged voice, we lose a fourth at the top, and then the next we lose a third, drop a third. In this stage, this stays about the same, but we lose the upper part, that F, G, E above middle C. And these students, in terms of where they're comfortable, they're really comfortable with about a 5-note range. A, B, C, D, E. Okay, some of them might get up to F, but this is where they're really, really limited in terms of accuracy. It's the toughest stage. And for some kids, they may linger the stage for a few weeks. Some of them, it might be a day. Every child is different. And the stages are unchanging. They'll all go through these stages. The amount of time they spend in every stage is distinct and unique. So for some kids, they have a very fast voice change. And it's not really traumatic. It happens overnight, and they sing beautifully. It's sort of like my husband. I remember when I was a middle school teacher, I said, "Tell me about your voice change. What was it like?" And he said, "Oh, I don't really remember it." I said, "Do you remember struggling singing?" No. No. I mean, he sang with vibrato as a child, right? Like, he probably came out of the womb. But some kids are like that. They just sing beautifully. That was not the case with me. I croaked like a frog when I came out, but it's made me so much better of a teacher to have to learn to sing. Mid-voice, so that's the worst part. New baritone, this is a period of stabilizing. And this voice is sort of a chameleon in that it sounds a little like this. It's a little like that. It's not really, there's not the profundity from the developed baritone. When we hear the adult baritone voice, here's a little bit of a cartoon, right? It's a little bit like that. So that's a clue to you. And I wouldn't put anyone in this stage unless they can sing a B, the B right below C3. If they have that note, they are officially new baritone, right? They are officially new baritone. And so they're going to be very happy singing baritone or bass. They are going to be absolutely miserable if you ask them to ever sing a middle C. That's the hardest note for them to sing because it sits at the bottom of their pistachio. I see people nodding heads. And for some, I had a student in North Texas who was a sophomore of bass 2, and he could not sing a middle C to save his life, and he's 20 years old. It's because he was a lower voice, and so his voice just cut out. He's in his 20s. And the developing baritone, you all know what, I missed a parentheses there, I have to go back and fix that. So their speaking voice, like for a young tenor or bass, their speaking fundamental frequency is going to shift a sixth to an octave. And for us, young soprano and alto, it's closer to a third in terms of how their speaking voice changes, how much lower it gets. So the first stage is very much like that young voice soprano. The second, so for all of these stages, you have the emergence of the first passaggio in this stage, then the emergence of the second passaggio in this stage, and then the fully adult voice. So when you're trying to when you're testing students, you want to look for the key characteristics of different stages. And there are kids that are outliers that don't always fit the criteria. But in large, I found these to be very, very clear and accessible in evaluating. So if you have a student who only has one passaggio, they're definitely in stage 2A. If you have a child who has developed the second passaggio, and I'll demonstrate to you what it sounds like and where they occur, and to talk about why it's problematic for singing. The prepubertal, there's your little kid. The first lifting point for the young soprano or alto happens between A and C above middle C. Right, so they get that. It's usually a little rockier than that, but there's a clear shift that you will hear. Sometimes there'll even be a whole C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. Sometimes they have a fuller voice up here. But then there's that hole between A and C. Isn't that ideal for treble writing? It's horrible because it's situated right where a lot of music exists, but it's going to be really hard for them. And that's what we want to look at. We want to look at the tessitura of the writing, not necessarily the range. The range tells us something. The tessitura is far more powerful. So I just want to encourage you that sometimes there are arrangers, there are composers who know the adolescent voice inside and out. And I'm sure you return to them because their music works. There are other composers and arrangers who receive what I would call to them a more arbitrary set of guidelines. Okay, for SAB music, the baritone can be within these pitches. The alto can be within these pitches, and the soprano should be within these pitches. But that doesn't mean that person has an understanding of the idiosyncratic nature of the voice. And so what we see often, and I'll show you this in some examples, that oftentimes middle school music, SAB, three-part music, is composed in F major, which is one of the worst places to sing, because the dominant is the C. And what do we often give the baritones? Big 5, right? So much of the music is situated right at the most difficult place for them to sing. The alto usually lives around middle C. They just sing C, D, B flat, maybe an E, maybe an F. And then the sopranos living A's, C's, high F. And high F is a big problem, and we'll talk about that right now, why that's a problem for young sopranos. So I just say that to you to look at the tessitura, not just the range when you're evaluating whether music is going to work. So that second passaggio, this is the worst stage. Stage 2B is the toughest stage for a young soprano and alto. And this menarcheal word just has to do with menstruating. So this is for them a marker of puberty and changing into the adult. And typically the height spurt, there is a growth spurt, a height spurt. It precedes puberty a bit. So kids will get taller just before they go through those secondary changes. So the second passaggio is D, E, F. And I will tell you, because I work with collegiate sopranos and altos, that D, E, F region is an enigmatic part of the voice that many people suffer and struggle with, right? For me, it was the biggest gap in my voice, and that's why I sang alto in college, because even though I'm a soprano, I'm not an alto. I didn't know what to do with the second passaggio because no one helped me, and I had a huge hole there. And that's one of the reasons I just thought I was a bad singer. I'm on C. C, D, F, G, then the A is a switch. A, B, C. Then they can sometimes come into that, but I just wanted to wake you up. Look, it's a little slippy. You can tell I love teaching middle school. You get to do stuff like this all day, and people appreciate it. That upper passaggio, D, E, F sharp, is emergent when we get to this third, 2B. It's really, really tough. This is why oftentimes middle school and even young treble singers in high school will sharp when they get to that region. How many of you have stood in front of a choir of youngsters and man, those treble voices are sharping like it's their job? Yes, that's because their voice doesn't want to be in that locus of change. It is not an easy place to sing. So if we situate the sopranos, and let's be honest, a lot of soprano writing is from C to F. And that's we're putting them in a difficult place. So we're asking them, when I go out and adjudicate middle school choir festivals, this is not anyone's fault, but there are so many young, especially young teachers who haven't worked with middle school students that look and get a publisher's reading packet of middle school read. And so many of these things could be averted if there were slight adjustments to the repertoire. So we can give alternate notes, we can anticipate some things that sometimes we're making the process harder on ourselves if we don't see this in the rep before we give it to our students. Yeah?
So you've just unlocked something in my head after doing church music for so long. So my statement is this. I think I've worked with a ton of sopranos in all my church choirs who were in high school choir, but never studied voice.
Sure.
So they never, this area that you're talking about from C to F, they never figured that out. And so what I see in adults is what we might call untrained singers that have a voice.
Sure.
The sopranos, they're never sure how to approach whether I bring a lot of chest into that and try to belt it out.
Sure.
Because I'm not confident in my head voice. Because I never cracked that egg.
Yeah.
Because I think it takes some personal voice training for these girls to navigate that passaggio.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
So I think I'm still dealing with this problem.
I mean,
with these sopranos, because the music, a lot of it's lower now, but when we come across a piece where it's in that space, I feel like they're not sure what to do. Then when it gets above that, they just do the, or they do the imitation opera lady, which works if they have a decent instrument.
Yeah, it's absolutely true, and this is what, we all have tastes in terms of our oral ideal. So when we think about our oral image of sound, some of us like a bigger soprano sound, and some of us like what I would call more Anglican sound, on the continuum, less vibrato, just a narrower space. But what can happen is if those young sopranos are only singing in what I'll call the more Anglican paradigm, and they only sing in a tooty, fluty, upper passaggio, that modality, so that you can hear what happens. I shifted there. Hear the difference? So it's like a passageway to a room, and if you never get the key, you never get to the room. But that's in there. That's in there. Okay. And this is where you see. Now there are always anomalies. Hey, friend. There are always anomalies, but usually in these latter stages, we start to see the emergence of a natural vibrato. Okay, it's not present in every single voice. I didn't know what a vibrato was until I made it into the all-state choir, and the woman next to me asked the conductor, "Do you know what that stands up called vibrato?" To the conductor, and I was like, "Yes. What is your preference?" And I came home from all-state with a vibrato. My conductor said, "Where'd you get that vibrato?" I was like, "It just happened." But for me, I had only sung with a straight tone sound because that's all I had ever heard. I hadn't experienced it. And so that's how I found my vibrato. I encourage my 8th graders to find their vibrato. So I am team vibrato, my friends. We all have our prejudices. I am team vibrato. As a default, but we use mano vibrato as an artistic device, certainly in choirs that I lead. But in general, the vibrato occurs when there's an absence of tension. Have you ever been to the gym and you get a tremor because you are pushing, right? It's your body's natural response. That's what's happening. It's an absence of tension. And so if your body is feeling tense, then the vibrato comes through as a way to release the tension. So you'll see that happening when they get through that change. All right, oh gosh, do we only have 12 minutes left? Goodness. All right, so here's the parallel map for the female adolescent changing voice. So that's the first lifting point, right? So if we have no lifts, no passaggio, we're in unchanged voice. If we have one passaggio, we're in the second stage. If we have 2 passaggio, and there are 2 holes in our voice, we're in the third stage. And then stage 3, that other lifting point still occurs, but what I'm in head voice right now. You can take the head voice quite a bit lower once you're trained. Okay, average mean speaking pitches. So when we look at the speaking fundamental frequencies, we see them get much lower. Okay, cool. All right, so let's do a little voice testing, and I need a volunteer. Yeah, come down. Okay. Are you kids on Olivia? Otherwise, I would have, but I'm not going to do a double feature for Olivia. Hannah, we're just going to teach people how to find a speaking fundamental frequency. You don't have to sing. Okay. Okay. So it's just a speaking exercise. So everybody say hi to Hannah. Hi. I met Hannah yesterday. Yes. We're best friends. Yeah. Yeah. What happens when you meet people? So in general, people don't usually speak with their true voice. They speak too low. They speak too low. And I taught myself very early in my career to speak at a much higher speaking fundamental frequency because of wanting to preserve my instrument and knowing that I was singing for 8 hours a day. And so that's where people get into trouble when they speak out in the vocal fry and they talk down here. Do you hear that pitch change? Okay. So knowing that people are usually not speaking at their correct fundamental frequency, as soon as we ask for a higher dynamic, they pitch it higher. And so you have to set up a structure that forces them to speak at a higher pitch so you can find their true speaking fundamental frequency. So Hannah, your grandma, we're in Carnegie Hall, grandma is in the back row, and she came all the way from the southern tip of Texas to see you. And so she really wants to hear you. Can you count backwards so that grandma in the back row, so you're gonna go 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, and make sure grandma in the back row can hear you. You can just say that. Okay.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4,
then try to find it on the keyboard. And I always sustain it. So when Hannah came up, I went, I heard her go 10, 10, 10, 10. I went, and then I found it on the keyboard. She doesn't have to know any of that, right? It could be just, hey, okay, you're gonna come and you're gonna count backward, and I want you to speak to that back wall. It could be super fast. You don't have to fill the kids in on everything. So you identify the SFF. That's your first clue as to where they are. What's interesting also with the soprano and alto, just like the tenor and bass voice, the voice dips and then it comes back up. Okay? So when I'm in the height of my voice change, my speaking voice is going to be lower. I'm more comfortable right here. Like when I talk to a lot of 7th grade sopranos and altos, they actually sound more like this, right? And so the voice buoys once it's stabilized. So then you start that's your first clue. You're like Sherlock Holmes gathering information. You find the SFF, then you look for passagios. Okay, you look for the passaggi. And oh my goodness. I don't have highly attuned time management skills. We're running out of time. What I will do is practice. I tell all of the students in the same room, I describe every voice change stage to them. I model it for them, so I imitate what it's like. I've given them a sheet of paper with the pitches drawn out, and they keep that for the year, and we write on that where they are at different times. So every single kid has a map, and they know what's coming next. And we're looking throughout the year, and I told my students, anytime you want a voice change, you let me know. If something happens, we'll all listen, and we'll make sure that you're in the right spot. I also would give kids options. Almost always kids chose to sing in the section that was most appropriate, because it's not very fun to sing in a section that you can't match the pitch. So like for me, singing in a bass section of choir would be not desirable or rewarding, because I would grovel, right? And sometimes if someone's not guiding a kid through it, they'll just make the easiest social choice and think, I'm not very good at this, I shouldn't continue. I can't do what the other kids are doing, and it might be as simple as a voice swap in terms of doing a different section. Identify the range of tessitura, encourage them to sing where they have pitches, involve them in the process, and then invite them to support and share. So when I taught middle school, I had a tenor bass choir, a 7th and 8th grade tenor bass choir. 8 a.m. every day. When they switched the schedule and I got them at 2 p.m., I was like, let's go back to 8 a.m. But there was huge celebration when one of the students would go from the tenor section to the baritone section. Like, it was a big deal, and they were all in it together. And because they had that shared experience, they were so supportive of one another, and we made it a safe environment, but a very big deal because they were all going through that at the same time. Every voice is unique. Voice change, okay, these are all things. Okay, I'm gonna just fly through this. Avoid associating gender with parts. This is so important for our voice, that we do not say boys and girls, because we want those boys to sing soprano as long as possible. And so speaking about them with their voice types is so helpful. Or part 1, part 2, that's another way, so that they're less inclined to say, I'm a man, I need to do this, right? So this just creates an environment where they're singing in a place that is more appropriate for their voice. Limited ranges for those in the really climactic changes. So ranges of a 6th, ranges of a 5th. For our sopranos and altos, it's that 3rd stage. And for the tenors and basses, it's the 4th stage of 6. Okay. All right, so here are some tools. I promised you I'd give you some tools. So, to deal with blow dryer tone, howl. And so I would have howling contests with my kids every rehearsal. Nobody ever beat me. Again, sixth graders. Oh yeah, you think you can beat me? So, but they would time themselves. So I encourage them to try and beat themselves. So like, how long can you howl? And what we're doing is we're teaching them to bring full closure to the folds. If you take a balloon and stretch the lip of the balloon, you get a lot of noise as the air rushes out. If you take that same balloon and you open the mouth of the balloon, the air rushes out silently. That's how your folds work. So then giving kids an experience in the extremes. So everybody in the room, for fun, let's all howl just for a bit. Just go, woo! With me, try it. Oh, yeah, the resonance is kicking. Okay. Now, get as much air out as you can, as fast as you can. Let your lungs just like that. How much air can you get out? Try it. Yeah, so see how fast. And usually we cough after that because we just dried out the vocal folds, right? So having them experience the extremes so that they understand breath management. This is a great mystery. How on earth did God devise a way for us to translate air and breath into sound? It's miraculous, and yet we take it for granted. The fact that we sing in harmony, we take it for granted. It's so good and so important to fly out and to continue to remind students of the wonder of the human body and the systems that work in concert with one another, that the brain takes electricity and creates thought, and then it commands the voice to do certain things. That makes me just amazing, just marvelous. Okay. With tenors and basses, the cartoon voice. So with all of them, I do the howling thing. It's really good for tenors and basses that are learning how to act once their voices change to access the space between the registers, right? Because you'll often get, right? And so then there's that no man's land in the middle where they can't phonate at all. It's either or right? Those are the two extremes. And so howling can help them circumvent it. It's just like a vocal siren. But when they get to be wolves, it's more fun. So with tenors and basses, I found 30 seconds each. The most helpful thing to access a mixed registration. Do you know what I mean when I say mixed registration? So we have chest voice, and then we have falsetto or head voice, and then we have the space between the two, and how do we mix the modalities? So it's not just belt and then crack and gone. It's speaking in that cartoon voice.
Look, hello everybody, can you say hi? Say hi, yeah. Yes, but you gotta be able to do this.
So, oh my gosh, do not post that.
Do it.
What is happening right now? I thought this was a safe place. Oh man, okay. So I learned this from one of the most brilliant people who work in young tenors and basses. I've never heard a tenor and bass choir till this day who sings as well as his choir, Eric Longman in Michigan. And he had he would do this with them, and it works. And then you slowly make it more beautiful. But again, when we situate the sound outside of being beautiful, they will do it. Okay? And so my exercise, so the last thing I'll leave you with, because I know I'm out of time, and I'm sorry that I didn't get to my error detecting portion of the session where we look at scores and see why it's problematic, is for a soprano, for a young soprano and alto to deal with that upper passaggio. The E vowel is my favorite. And just doing a 3-note scale and making the voice very forward. Z, 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 Z. It's going to get real ugly, and you can time this by 50 if you have 50 in your treble choir. do anything above C. I couldn't do anything. She taught me this technique, and she called it sniffing. She would sit in the back of the auditorium when we were singing, going, well, kids would sing because she wanted us to sing with resonance, but it really changed things for me and got me to sing to a forward resonant place. I have to add beauty, but what I would leave you with